I know everything.
The text message glowed on my wife's phone screen like a neon sign in the darkness. This weekend, his house. No regrets. I set Lisa's phone back on the kitchen counter exactly where I'd found it, my hands surprisingly steady despite the earthquake happening inside my chest. 23 years of marriage, 2 kids, a mortgage we'd sweated over together, and apparently my wife was planning to throw it all away for whatever scumbag was texting her at midnight. Before we dive deeper into this story, I have one small request. Please subscribe, drop a like, comment, and hit that hype button to boost this channel so more people can discover these incredible Reddit stories. My name is Ryan Carter, and until 30 seconds ago, I thought I had a pretty good handle on my life. I'm a corporate attorney in Dallas, not the ambulance-chasing kind, but the boring contracts and mergers type that keeps the lights on and pays for Lisa's endless redecorating projects. At 39, I've got the standard suburban package: receding hairline, expanding waistline, and a wife who's been growing more distant by the month. I poured myself 3 fingers of bourbon and sat in my leather chair, staring out at our perfectly manicured lawn. The house was quiet. Emma and Jake were asleep upstairs, blissfully unaware that their world was about to implode. Lisa was at another one of her mysterious book club meetings that seemed to run later and later these days. The signs had been there, of course. They always are. Lisa had started working out obsessively, buying expensive lingerie that I never saw her wear, and developing a sudden interest in girls' nights out with her friend Melissa. She'd been distant in bed, distracted during conversations, and increasingly critical of everything I did. "You're so predictable, Ryan," she'd said just last week. "Same job, same routine, same boring conversations every night." I should have seen it coming when she started hanging around Alan Becker again. Alan was my old college buddy turned real estate hotshot, recently divorced, and apparently working his way through every desperate housewife in North Dallas. He'd been showing up at our barbecues and dinner parties with increasing frequency, always with some new story about his latest conquest or business deal. "You know what your problem is, Carter?" Alan had said at our last barbecue, beer in hand and that trademark smirk on his face. "You play it too safe. Sometimes you've got to take what you want." I'd laughed it off then, thinking he was talking about business. Now I realized he'd been talking about my wife. The front door opened with its familiar squeak, the one I kept meaning to fix but never got around to. Lisa's heels clicked across the hardwood floor, and I heard her drop her purse on the hall table. "Ryan, you still up?" Her voice had that fake casual tone she'd been using lately. "In here," I called out, not moving from my chair. She appeared in the doorway, looking perfectly put together despite her supposed 3-hour book discussion. Her blonde hair was freshly styled, her makeup touched up, and she was wearing the black dress I'd complimented her on earlier. "How was book club?" I asked, taking another sip of bourbon. "Oh, you know how it is. Melissa gets so passionate about character development." She avoided my eyes, busying herself with straightening magazines on the coffee table. "What are you doing up so late?" "Just thinking about things. About us." Something in my tone must have caught her attention, because she finally looked at me directly. "What do you mean?" I could have confronted her right then. Could have thrown the phone at her and demanded an explanation. But something cold and calculating was settling into my chest, pushing aside the hurt and anger. Lisa wanted to play games? Fine. I'd been underestimated my whole life. The quiet guy, the steady Eddie, the one who could be counted on to never make waves. Time to show her what a mistake that was. "Nothing important," I said, finishing my drink. "Just work stuff. You know how boring that gets." She relaxed visibly. "Well, don't stay up too much longer. You look tired." "I'll be up soon," I lied. After she went upstairs, I sat in the darkness for another hour, my mind working through possibilities. I'd built a successful law practice by being thorough, methodical, and always thinking 3 steps ahead. Those same skills would serve me well now. By the time I finally went to bed, Lisa was asleep, or pretending to be. I lay beside her, listening to her breathing, and began planning her destruction. The private investigator's office looked exactly like what central casting would order for a film noir movie: frosted glass door, Venetian blinds, and the lingering smell of cigarettes and disappointment. Jake Anderson sat behind a desk that had seen better decades, studying the photos I'd brought him. "Standard cheating spouse case?" he asked, not looking up from the pictures of Lisa and Alan at various restaurants around town. "Not exactly standard," I said. "I need everything: financial records, communications, associates, patterns of behavior. I want to know what she had for breakfast and who she called to complain about it." Jake raised an eyebrow. He was a former Dallas PD detective who'd gone private after some unspecified trouble with internal affairs. Rumor was he bent rules when it suited his clients, which made him perfect for what I had in mind. "That kind of investigation gets expensive fast," he warned. I slid a retainer check across his desk. Money isn't an issue. While Jake worked his magic, I began my own reconnaissance. Lisa's behavior patterns were remarkably predictable once I started paying attention. Tuesday and Thursday, book clubs that always ran late. Saturday shopping trips with Melissa that never resulted in any purchases. And an increasing number of evening charity committee meetings for organizations I'd never heard of. The breakthrough came on a Thursday evening. I'd told Lisa I was working late, then parked across from Melissa's house to wait. Sure enough, Lisa's BMW pulled out at 7:30, but instead of heading toward any bookstore, she drove straight to Alan's condo complex. I followed at a distance, my hands gripping the steering wheel so tight, my knuckles went white. She parked in the visitors section and walked to Alan's building like she'd done it 100 times before. The casual familiarity of it, the way she didn't even hesitate at the entrance, how she knew exactly which buzzer to press, hit me harder than if I'd walked in on them in bed. My phone buzzed with a text from Lisa. "Book club running really late tonight. Don't wait up." I sat in my car for 3 hours, watching the lights in Alan's third-floor window, imagining what they were doing up there. When Lisa finally emerged at 11:15, her hair was mussed and her dress wrinkled. She sat in her car for a few minutes, checking her appearance in the mirror and reapplying lipstick. The next morning at breakfast, she was practically glowing. "You seem happy," I observed, passing her the coffee. "Oh, I just love our book discussions. Such stimulating conversation." She smiled at some private joke. "We're reading this fascinating novel about a woman who discovers she's been living the wrong life." "Sounds enlightening," I said dryly. "It really is. Sometimes you don't realize how trapped you've been until you see what freedom looks like." Emma looked up from her cereal. "What's trapped mean, Mommy?" "It's when you're stuck somewhere you don't want to be, sweetie," Lisa said, shooting a meaningful glance in my direction. I wanted to grab her by the shoulders and scream that she was destroying our family for a piece of garbage like Alan Becker. Instead, I smiled and ruffled Emma's hair. "Sometimes people think they're trapped when really they just need to appreciate what they have," I said mildly. Lisa's smile faltered slightly, but she recovered quickly. "Well, some people are easily satisfied with mediocrity." That afternoon, Jake called with his preliminary report. "Your wife's definitely having an affair, but that's not the interesting part," he said. "This Alan Becker character has some serious financial irregularities. Looks like he's been running a side business selling properties off the books, using social connections to find buyers." "What kind of social connections?" "The kind your wife provides. Those charity events and dinner parties she hosts. Perfect hunting ground for wealthy clients who want to avoid certain tax implications. So Lisa wasn't just cheating on me, she was helping her boyfriend defraud people. The irony was almost beautiful. My wife thought she was trading up from her boring husband to some exciting bad boy, but she was actually just becoming an accessory to white-collar crime. "Keep digging," I told Jake. I want to know everything about both of them. That weekend, we attended the Hendersons' annual barbecue, the same social circle where Lisa and Alan had been conducting their not-so-secret affair. I watched them carefully, noting how they managed to find excuses to talk privately, how Lisa's laughter got a little too loud when Alan told his stories, how they exchanged looks across the patio when they thought no one was watching. "Your wife seems to really enjoy Alan's company," observed Tom Henderson, following my gaze. "Oh yes, Lisa's always been drawn to entertaining personalities," I replied. "She finds predictability so boring." Alan was holding court by the pool, regaling a group of wives with some story about his latest real estate coup. "The key is knowing what people really want," he was saying. "Most folks are living lives that are way too small for them. They just need someone to show them the possibilities." Several of the women were hanging on his every word, including Lisa, who was standing closer to him than necessary. I noticed Melissa watching the interaction with an odd expression, not jealous exactly, but calculating. "You know what I love about real estate?" Alan continued, his voice carrying across the patio. "It's all about recognizing value that other people miss. Sometimes the most beautiful properties are just waiting for someone brave enough to make an offer." Lisa actually giggled at this profound observation. My wife, the woman who used to roll her eyes at cheesy pickup lines, was giggling at Alan Becker's real estate metaphors. I excused myself and went inside to use the bathroom, but really I wanted a moment to process what I was seeing. In the Hendersons' guest bathroom, I stared at myself in the mirror. I looked exactly like what I was, a middle-aged suburban dad who'd been taking his life for granted. But appearances could be deceiving. Lisa and Alan had made the classic mistake of underestimating the quiet guy. They thought I was too boring, too predictable, too nice to be a threat. They were about to learn how wrong they were. When I returned to the party, I found Alan and Lisa standing by the garden, speaking in low voices. I approached casually, pretending to admire the Hendersons' rose bushes. "Trust me," Alan was saying. "A whole new life is waiting for you. You just have to be brave enough to reach for it." "I know," Lisa replied. "I'm just tired of feeling like I'm wasting my time with someone who'll never change." "Some people are exactly what they appear to be," Alan said. "No hidden depths, no surprises. What you see is what you get." I stepped into view, smiling pleasantly. "Great party, isn't it? The Hendersons really outdid themselves this year." Both of them startled slightly, and I caught a flash of guilt in Lisa's eyes before she recovered her composure. "Oh, hi, honey. We were just talking about the landscaping," she said smoothly. "Beautiful roses," I agreed, looking directly at Alan. "Though I've always heard you have to be careful with thorns. Sometimes the prettiest flowers cause the most damage." Alan's smile was pure arrogance. "Only if you don't know how to handle them properly." "True," I said. "But in my experience, the guys who brag about their gardening skills usually end up getting pricked." We stood there for a moment, the subtext hanging in the air like smoke. Then Lisa laughed nervously and suggested we rejoin the party. As we walked back toward the patio, I heard Alan mutter something to Lisa about not worrying about it. She squeezed his arm briefly, a gesture so casual and familiar that it told me everything I needed to know about how long this had been going on. That night, after Lisa had gone to sleep, I sat in my study and began making lists. Assets, accounts, social connections, vulnerabilities. I'd spent my career dismantling corporate structures and finding weaknesses in seemingly solid arrangements. Now I was going to use those same skills to destroy my wife and her lover. Jake Anderson's full report arrived on a Tuesday morning, delivered to my office in a manila envelope that contained enough ammunition to level a small city. I locked my door and spread the contents across my desk like a general planning a campaign. The photographs were damning but not surprising. Lisa and Alan entering his condo, leaving restaurants together, embracing in parking lots. What interested me more were the financial documents Jake had somehow obtained. Alan's real estate business was even shadier than we'd initially thought. He was running a sophisticated scheme, using Lisa's social connections to identify wealthy clients, then selling them properties through shell companies that avoided various taxes and reporting requirements. But the real bombshell was in the final section of the report. Melissa, Lisa's supposed best friend and confidant, was blackmailing both of them. She'd been documenting their affair and Alan's business dealings, using the information to extract money from Lisa's event planning business and to get preferential treatment in Alan's property deals. My wife wasn't just cheating on me, she was being played by both her lover and her best friend. The irony was so perfect I almost laughed out loud. I picked up my phone and called Derek Martinez, my law partner and one of the few people I trusted completely. "I need a favor," I said when he answered. "What kind of favor?" "The kind where you don't ask too many questions until afterward." Derek had been my friend since law school, and he knew me well enough to hear the steel in my voice. "What do you need?" "Help me move some assets around. Quietly." Over the next 2 weeks, I systematically restructured our family's finances. The house went into a trust with the kids as beneficiaries. Investment accounts were reorganized. Credit lines were adjusted. Everything was completely legal. I was too smart to do anything that could come back to bite me. But the net effect was to make Lisa's anticipated divorce settlement considerably smaller than she was expecting. I also began documenting everything: hidden cameras in common areas of the house, audio recordings of Lisa's phone calls, screenshots of her text messages. I felt like a stalker in my own home, but the evidence would be crucial later. The breakthrough came on a Thursday evening. Lisa was at another book club meeting, and I was reviewing contracts in my study when I heard her come home. She was on the phone, speaking in hushed tones as she climbed the stairs. "No, he doesn't suspect anything," she was saying. "Ryan's completely clueless. He's so wrapped up in his boring little world that he wouldn't notice if I brought you home and did you on the kitchen table." I heard Alan's laughter through the phone. "Trust me," Lisa continued. "When I file for divorce, I'll take him for everything he's worth. The house, the kids, half his business. He won't know what hit him." "What about the other thing?" Alan asked, his voice clearer now as Lisa apparently switched to speakerphone. "Melissa's handling it. She's got 3 more clients lined up for the Austin properties. Your little side business is going to make us very comfortable. Just make sure she doesn't get too greedy. We don't need any unnecessary attention. Don't worry about Melissa. I've got her under control." I sat in my chair, listening to my wife plan my destruction, and felt something cold and hard crystallize in my chest. The hurt was still there, but it was being rapidly overtaken by something much more dangerous. Calculation. They thought they were so clever, so much smarter than boring old Ryan Carter. They had no idea that boring old Ryan Carter had been quietly building a case that would destroy all 3 of them. The next morning at breakfast, Lisa was practically bouncing with excitement. "I've been thinking," she announced, buttering her toast with unusual enthusiasm. "Maybe it's time we made some changes around here." "What kind of changes?" I asked, though I knew exactly what was coming. "Well, the kids are getting older, and I'm feeling like I need more independence. Maybe we should consider a trial separation." Emma looked up from her cereal with worried eyes. "What's a trial separation?" "It's when mommies and daddies take a little break from each other," Lisa said gently. "Sometimes people need space to figure out what they really want." "But I don't want you to take a break," Emma said, her lower lip trembling. I reached over and squeezed her hand. "Don't worry, sweetheart. Nobody's going anywhere." Lisa shot me a sharp look. "We should discuss this privately." "Of course," I agreed. "But let's not upset the kids with hypothetical conversations." That evening, after Emma and Jake were in bed, Lisa cornered me in the living room. She'd clearly been rehearsing this speech. "Ryan, I think we both know this marriage isn't working anymore," she began. "We've grown apart, we want different things, and I think it would be best for everyone if we made a clean break." "I see," I said calmly. "And what exactly do you think you want?" I want a life with some excitement in it, some passion, some possibility. She was pacing now, warming to her theme. I feel like I've been sleepwalking for years, and I'm finally ready to wake up. With Alan Becker? The question stopped her cold. For just a moment, her mask slipped, and I saw panic flash across her face. I don't know what you're talking about, she said, but her voice lacked conviction. Lisa, please, I'm not an idiot. Despite what you apparently think, I know about the affair. She stared at me for a long moment, then seemed to make a decision. Her expression hardened, and I saw a side of my wife I'd never seen before. Fine. Yes, I'm seeing Alan. And you know what? I'm not sorry. He makes me feel alive in a way you never have. How long? 6 months. And it's been the best 6 months of my life. I nodded thoughtfully, as if processing this information for the first time. Well, I appreciate your honesty. I assume you'll want to file for divorce soon. She blinked, clearly surprised by my calm reaction. Yes, I think that would be best. And I assume you've given thought to custody arrangements, division of assets, that sort of thing? My lawyer says I should get the house and primary custody, plus alimony and child support. She was watching me carefully now, trying to gauge my reaction. Your lawyer? You've already consulted an attorney? I wanted to understand my options. I stood up and walked to the window, looking out at our perfectly manicured suburban street. Well, Lisa, I think you're going to find that your options are somewhat more limited than you expect. What do you mean? I turned back to face her, and I let her see the cold fury I'd been hiding for weeks. I mean that adultery affects divorce settlements in Texas. I mean that your boyfriend's real estate scam is about to become very public. And I mean that your friend Melissa has been blackmailing you both. The color drained from her face. You're bluffing. I walked to my desk and pulled out a thick folder. Photos, financial records, recorded conversations, text messages, everything. Lisa grabbed the folder and flipped through it, her hands shaking. When she looked up at me, there was something like fear in her eyes. You bastard! You've been spying on me. I've been protecting my family, I corrected. Something you stopped doing months ago. What do you want? I want you to understand that the game has changed. You and Alan thought you were playing against some boring suburban dad who'd roll over and let you take everything. Instead, you're playing against someone who's been 3 steps ahead of you from the beginning. I walked over and took the folder back from her trembling hands. Here's what's going to happen, Lisa. You're going to call your lawyer and tell her you've changed your mind about the divorce. You're going to break things off with Alan, and you're going to start acting like a wife and mother again. And if I don't? I smiled, but there was no warmth in it. Then you're going to discover just how creative a corporate attorney can be when he's properly motivated. She stared at me for a long moment, and I could see her mind working, trying to find an angle, a way out, some leverage she could use against me. You can't prove any of this, she said finally. Try me. We stood there in our living room, 23 years of marriage reduced to a standoff between enemies. Finally, Lisa turned and walked toward the stairs. This isn't over, Ryan, she said without looking back. No, I agreed. It's not. But as I watched her climb the stairs, I knew she was wrong about one thing. The game wasn't just beginning, it was almost over, and I was going to win. Lisa's first move was predictable. She ran straight to Alan. I knew this because I'd been monitoring her communications, and within an hour of our confrontation, she was texting frantically. Emergency. Need to see you tonight. Ryan knows everything. I let her go to their meeting, confident that panic would make them sloppy. While she was gone, I made my own phone calls, setting the next phase of my plan in motion. The first call was to Detective Sarah Morrison at Dallas PD's White Collar Crime Division. Sarah and I had worked together on several cases where my corporate clients had been victims of fraud, and she owed me a few favors. I've got some information about a real estate scam you might find interesting, I told her, keeping my voice casual. What kind of scam? The kind where properties are sold through shell companies to avoid tax reporting. I'll send you the details. The second call was to the Texas Real Estate Commission. Anonymous tips about licensing violations were taken very seriously, especially when accompanied by detailed financial documentation. The third call was to Tom Henderson, who sat on the board of our homeowners association and had always been suspicious of Alan's flashy lifestyle. Tom, I hate to be the bearer of bad news, but I think we might have a problem with one of our residents. By the time Lisa returned home that night, the wheels were already in motion. She found me in my study, reading a contract as if nothing had happened. "We need to talk," she said, her voice tight with barely controlled anger. "Of course. How was book club?" "Cut the crap, Ryan. Alan told me what you're planning, and it won't work." I looked up from my papers with mild interest. "What exactly am I planning?" "You think you can destroy us with your little investigation, but you're forgetting something important. If Alan goes down, a lot of other people go down with him. People with money and influence who won't appreciate being exposed." It was a decent bluff, but I'd been expecting it. "Are you threatening me, Lisa?" "I'm explaining reality. Some games are bigger than you think." I set down my contract and gave her my full attention. "Let me explain a different reality. In about 48 hours, Alan Becker is going to be under investigation by 3 different agencies. His real estate license will be suspended, his assets will be frozen, and his name will be all over the local news. The wealthy clients he's been defrauding will be looking for someone to blame, and I doubt they'll be very understanding about his personal circumstances." Lisa's confident expression wavered slightly. "You can't prove anything." "I can prove everything. Bank records, property transfers, shell company registrations. It's all documented. And that's before we get to the adultery evidence, which in Texas gives me significant advantages in divorce proceedings." "What do you want?" she asked, the fight going out of her voice. "I want you to understand that your boyfriend isn't the sophisticated operator you think he is. He's a small-time crook who's been using you to expand his client base, and your friend Melissa has been using both of you to line her own pockets." I pulled out another folder and handed it to her. "Melissa's been skimming money from your event planning business and using information about Alan's deals to get preferential treatment on property purchases. She's been playing you both from the beginning." Lisa opened the folder and stared at the financial records, her face going pale. "This can't be right." "Check your business accounts tomorrow. I think you'll find some interesting discrepancies." She sank into a chair, the folder falling from her hands. For the first time since this whole mess started, she looked genuinely shaken. "Why are you showing me this?" she asked quietly. "Because I want you to understand the situation completely before you make your next move. You thought you were trading up from a boring husband to an exciting lover and a loyal friend. Instead, you've been manipulated by a con artist and betrayed by someone you trusted." Lisa stared at the scattered papers, and I could see her reassessing everything she thought she knew. "What happens now?" "That depends entirely on your next decision. You can continue down this path and lose everything, your marriage, your kids, your financial security, and probably your freedom when the fraud investigation expands. Or you can start making better choices." "It's not that simple, Ryan. I can't just pretend none of this happened." "I'm not asking you to pretend anything. I'm asking you to choose between a fantasy that's already falling apart and a reality where you still have something left to salvage." She was quiet for a long time, staring at the evidence of how thoroughly she'd been played. Finally, she looked up at me with something that might have been respect. "When did you become so ruthless?" "When my family was threatened," I said simply. The next morning brought the first public consequences. Alan's real estate license was suspended pending investigation, and his office was visited by both the police and the State Regulatory Commission. By noon, the story was all over the local real estate community, and by evening, it had made the business section of the Dallas Morning News. I was in my office when Derek knocked on my door. "You want to tell me what's really going on?" he asked, settling into the chair across from my desk. "What do you mean?" Alan Becker called here 3 times today, ranting about how you're trying to destroy him. Your wife looked like she'd seen a ghost when she picked up the kids from school. And you've been moving money around like you're preparing for war. Derek had been my friend too long to be fooled by evasions. I told him everything, the affair, the fraud scheme, Melissa's blackmail operation, and my plans for dealing with all of it. When I finished, Derek was quiet for a moment. Then he started laughing. Jesus Christ, Ryan. You're not just playing chess while they're playing checkers. You're playing 3-dimensional chess while they're eating the pieces. I'm protecting my family. You're systematically destroying everyone who threatened your family. There's a difference. That evening, Lisa was waiting for me when I got home. She'd been crying, her makeup was smudged, and her eyes were red and swollen. Alan's finished, she said without preamble. His business is gone. His reputation is ruined, and he's talking about leaving Dallas. I'm sorry you're hurt, I said, and I meant it. Are you? Because this feels like you planned every detail to cause maximum damage. I plan to protect what matters to me. The damage to Alan is just a consequence of his own choices. And Melissa? What about her? Don't play dumb, Ryan. I know you're not finished with her. She was right, of course. Melissa's betrayal was in some ways worse than Alan's. He was just a predator doing what predators do. But Melissa had been Lisa's friend, someone we'd welcomed into our home, someone our kids called Aunt Melissa. Her betrayal was personal in a way that Alan's wasn't. Melissa made her choices too, I said carefully. What are you going to do? I'm going to make sure she faces the consequences of those choices. Lisa stared at me for a long moment. I don't even recognize you anymore. Good, I said. The person you recognized was someone who could be taken advantage of. Someone who would let his family be destroyed to avoid making waves. That person is gone. And what kind of person are you now? I looked at my wife, the woman who'd betrayed me, lied to me, and planned to destroy me, and felt nothing but cold calculation. I'm the kind of person who wins. Melissa's downfall began on a Saturday morning with a knock on her door from the IRS. I'd spent considerable time documenting her skimming operation, and tax evasion was one of those crimes that federal agencies took very seriously. By Monday, her assets were frozen, and by Wednesday, she was looking at potential jail time. But the real devastation came from the social consequences. I'd carefully leaked information about her blackmail scheme to key people in our social circle, and the reaction was swift and brutal. Melissa found herself cut off from every organization, committee, and social group she'd been part of. In our image-conscious suburban community, being labeled a blackmailer and thief was social ruin. Lisa watched it all happen with a mixture of fascination and horror. You're destroying everyone I care about, she said one evening as we watched the news coverage of Melissa's arrest. I'm destroying everyone who betrayed you, I corrected. There's a difference. Is there? Because from where I'm sitting, it looks like you're just enjoying the power. She wasn't entirely wrong. There was a certain satisfaction in watching people who'd underestimated me face the consequences of their actions. But it was more than that. It was about sending a message that actions have consequences, that betrayal has a price, and that the quiet guy everyone ignored was not someone to be dismissed. The final confrontation came on a Thursday evening. Lisa had been growing increasingly agitated as the walls closed in around her co-conspirators. She'd tried to reach out to Alan, but he'd fled to Arizona to stay with relatives. She'd tried to contact Melissa, but Melissa was too busy dealing with lawyers and federal investigators to take calls. I was in my study when I heard raised voices from the living room. Lisa was on the phone with someone, her voice shrill with panic. "You can't just abandon me," she was saying. "We're in this together." I couldn't hear the response, but whatever it was made Lisa even more agitated. "Fine," she snapped, "but don't come crawling back when you realize you need help." She hung up and stood there for a moment, staring at the phone. When she realized I was watching from the doorway, her expression hardened. "Satisfied?" she asked. "With what?" "With destroying my life, with isolating me from everyone I care about, with turning me into some kind of pariah." I walked into the room and sat down across from her. "Lisa, I didn't destroy your life. You did that yourself when you decided to have an affair and help defraud innocent people. Don't lecture me about morality, Ryan. You've been just as ruthless as anyone. The difference is that I've been protecting my family. You've been destroying it." She laughed bitterly. "Family? What family? You think Emma and Jake don't notice the tension in this house? You think they don't know something's wrong?" She had a point. Our kids had been walking on eggshells for weeks, sensing the conflict but not understanding it. Emma had started having nightmares, and Jake had become withdrawn and moody. "They'll adjust," I said, though I wasn't entirely convinced. "Will they? Or will they grow up thinking this is what marriage looks like, two people who can barely stand each other staying together out of spite?" It was a fair question, and one I'd been avoiding. In my focus on winning the war against Lisa and her accomplices, I hadn't given enough thought to what victory would actually look like. "What are you suggesting?" "I'm suggesting that maybe we should consider what's actually best for the kids, not just what satisfies your need for revenge." "This isn't about revenge. It's about justice." "Is it? Because from where I'm sitting, it looks like you've gotten everything you wanted. Alan's ruined, Melissa's facing jail time, and I'm completely dependent on you financially. You've won, Ryan. The question is, what do you plan to do with your victory?" I stared at my wife, this woman I'd once loved more than anything, and realized that she was right about one thing. I had won. But victory felt hollow when it came at the cost of everything I'd been trying to protect. "I want our marriage back," I said quietly. "That's not possible. Too much has happened. Too many things have been said and done that can't be taken back." "Then what do you want?" Lisa was quiet for a long time, staring out the window at our perfectly manicured lawn. When she finally spoke, her voice was barely above a whisper. "I want to stop hurting. I want to stop feeling like I'm trapped in a life that doesn't fit me anymore. And I want our kids to have parents who don't hate each other. I don't hate you, Lisa. Don't you? Because sometimes when you look at me, I see something cold and calculating that scares me." She wasn't wrong. The hurt and betrayal had changed me, hardened me in ways that might not be reversible. The question was whether that change was permanent or whether there was still something salvageable in the wreckage of our marriage. "So what happens now?" I asked. "I don't know. But I think we need to start being honest with each other about what we really want, not just what we think we deserve." That night, I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, thinking about Lisa's words. I'd won the war, but I wasn't sure what I'd actually gained. Alan was gone. Melissa was facing serious legal consequences, and Lisa was effectively trapped in a marriage she no longer wanted with a man she no longer recognized. The next morning brought an unexpected development. Derek called to tell me that Alan Becker had been arrested in Phoenix on fraud charges related to his real estate scheme. Apparently, the investigation had uncovered even more illegal activity than I'd originally documented. "He's looking at serious prison time," Derek reported, "and word is he's considering cooperating with prosecutors in exchange for a reduced sentence." What does that mean for Lisa? Depends on how much she actually knew about the illegal aspects of his business. If she was just a social connection, she's probably fine. But if she was actively involved in the fraud, he didn't need to finish the sentence. I knew exactly what it meant. I hung up and went to find Lisa. She was in the kitchen, making coffee with the mechanical precision of someone going through familiar motions while their mind was elsewhere. "We need to talk," I said. She looked up at me, and I saw something like resignation in her eyes. "Alan's been arrested, hasn't he?" "Yes, and he might be willing to cooperate with prosecutors." Lisa set down her coffee mug and stared out the window. How much trouble am I in? That depends on how involved you actually were in his business dealings. I introduced him to people. I hosted parties where he could meet potential clients. I thought it was just networking. Did you know about the shell companies, the tax avoidance schemes? I suspected something wasn't entirely legitimate, but I didn't ask for details. I didn't want to know. I studied my wife's face, trying to determine if she was telling the truth. After everything that had happened, trust was a luxury I couldn't afford. Lisa, I need you to understand something. If Alan decides to cooperate, he's going to try to minimize his own culpability by maximizing everyone else's, including yours. What are you saying? I'm saying that you need to decide right now whether you're going to face this as my wife or as my enemy. Because if you're my wife, I'll protect you. But if you're my enemy, you're on your own. She stared at me for a long moment, and I could see her weighing her options. Finally, she spoke. What would protecting me look like? It would look like the best legal representation money can buy. It would look like character witnesses and community support. It would look like a united front against anyone who tries to destroy our family. And in exchange? In exchange, you start acting like my wife again. You stop lying to me, you stop betraying me, and you start working with me instead of against me. Lisa was quiet for a long time, considering the offer. When she finally looked up at me, there was something different in her expression. Not love, exactly, but a kind of weary respect. Okay, she said simply. Okay? Okay, I'll be your wife again. Not because I have to, but because maybe it's time to stop fighting and start rebuilding. I felt something loosen in my chest, a tension I'd been carrying for months. It won't be easy. There's a lot of damage to repair. I know, but maybe we can start with the kids. They deserve better than what we've been giving them. That evening, we sat Emma and Jake down for a family meeting. We didn't tell them everything. They were too young for the full truth. But we explained that Mommy and Daddy had been having some problems and that we were working to fix them. Are you getting divorced? Emma asked, her voice small and worried. Lisa and I looked at each other across the table. No, sweetheart, Lisa said gently. We're not getting divorced. We're going to work harder to be a better family. Jake, ever practical, had a different concern. Does this mean no more fighting? We're going to try very hard not to fight anymore, I promised. After the kids were in bed, Lisa and I sat in the living room, not quite sure how to begin the process of rebuilding a marriage that had been so thoroughly damaged. I'm sorry, she said finally, for all of it, for the affair, for the lies, for planning to leave you. I was selfish and stupid, and I hurt everyone I was supposed to protect. I'm sorry too, I replied, for being distant and taking you for granted, for becoming someone cold and calculating, for caring more about winning than about healing. So where do we go from here? I don't know. But maybe we start by remembering why we fell in love in the first place. Lisa smiled sadly. That was a long time ago. We're different people now. Maybe, but maybe different doesn't have to mean worse. As I watched my wife, really looked at her for the first time in months, I realized that our marriage might actually survive this. Not unchanged, certainly, but perhaps stronger for having been tested so severely. The war was over. Now came the harder task of building peace.